Welcome to Association Chat, an online discussion for the association community where we warm ourselves by the virtual fire, welcoming thought leaders and trailblazers alike to join up in this online home for the community. I'm the host of Association Chat, KiKi L'Italien, and today we are talking with none other than American humorist Mo Rocca. Mo is a journalist, he's an actor, correspondent for CBS Sunday Morning. He's the host and creator of My Grandmother's Ravioli on the Cooking Channel, host of the Henry Ford's Innovation Nation on CBS, and also published a book called Mobituaries, Great Lives Worth Reliving. You can also hear him on the Mobituaries podcast. Mo, welcome. I'm so excited to talk with you today.
KiKi, I'm so excited to be associating with you.
Associating, nice. I see what you did there. All right, so I have to thank you because I cannot believe you've taken the time to talk with association people like us when you spend your time doing fascinating research on dead people. You're on Wait, Don't Tell Me, and you just shot marbles with Vanna White. I mean, what's that all about?
Well, look, I got tired of hanging out with the institution people. So that's why I moved over to the association people. And everyone knows the organization people are super boring.
I mean, that's true.
and the foundation people just ask for money.
Right.
I highly recommend shooting marbles with Vanna White. Vanna White, you know, it's funny. I shot an interview with Vanna White right before people started sheltering in place because it all happened so quickly. Mm-hmm. And it turned out, at least based on viewer response, this was a piece for CBS Sunday Morning, that she's kind of the tonic that everyone needed. First of all, she's, maybe this shouldn't have come as a surprise to me. She's so popular and among so many different types of people, but I think especially in a moment that, let's face it, is very gloomy for a lot of people right now, you know, with this pandemic. Vanna White is, I mean, she kind of is a perennial. I mean, when the rest of us are gone, she doesn't turn the letters, she'll still be touching those letters.
Oh, and she'll touch the letters in our hearts, you know.
Yeah, she really will.
There was a TV movie with Vanna White that I remember from my youth that she played like Aphrodite or something. Do you remember this?
Gosh, it was probably, you know, I do so many pieces that I sort of wiped the hard drive clean at one point.
It's maybe better. I don't know. Like it wasn't necessarily the best, but I keep going back and I think she looks the same. It's amazing. I don't know how this woman does it, but she might be Aphrodite. I don't know what to say, but
you know, the one thing we weren't able to get in the piece, regrettably because of time constraints, is that, you know, thematically what we talked about is that she really does root for the contestants to win. And I know that sounds silly and that sounds trite, but people can pick up, you know, through that TV screen, people can pick up, I think, genuine, they can pick up sincerity. I mean, some people can fake it, but you can't fake it for that many years. And I think people do realize that she really is on the side of these people. And she told me at one point how moved she was that one contestant a few years ago, after winning a big amount of money, when she walked over towards him, she could hear him under his breath say, "Now I can buy a truck." And I think he was somebody who had been having to borrow a truck. I don't remember what the circumstance was, but it was one of those things where it struck her, this is a big deal for people.
Wow. Yeah. Well, you know, and speaking of big deals, I mean, this has been such a crazy year. How has 2020 impacted you? Because, you know, you talked about, are you doing now what you thought you were going to be doing when the year started? Probably not.
No. I tried to look, certainly work-wise, to look at this as a creative challenge. So CBS Sunday Morning is ostensibly, you know, it's been on for more than 40 years. It's an arts and culture program. So we definitely do some current events, but one of the tricks during this time is how to do pieces creatively that are 1 foot in, 1 foot out. So you don't want to do pieces all about the pandemic, because that's not what people would come to us for. And of course it would get you down, and that's not what we're there for. But you also don't want to do pieces that are so escapist that they just seem like, they just seem tone deaf.
Yeah.
And so that's been that's kept me going through a lot of this, is figuring out what I can do that gives people something of a break, is edifying, entertaining, certainly, but doesn't seem out of time and place.
Mm-hmm.
So things like, the history of the handshake, because who knows when the handshake will come back, and if it ever really will. Pieces like that, or the history of quackery, of quack medicine. And so it's been a creative challenge, and that's been good.
Yeah. Well, I think it's definitely taking us to new and unusual places, because, things haven't gone according to plan. And as a result of that, we're forced to come up with new ways of doing all kinds of stuff. So it's really been interesting to me to see that we've had technology to help people create virtual events and virtual versions of things for years. And then, but nobody felt, pushed to do it, or to do remote working and stuff like that. And to see like what Broadway's doing. And I know you're involved with the Broadway scene. Coming up with new ways for people to perform together and to create together it's inspiring. But I have to imagine everyone's sick of it, like sick of trying to do stuff from home, Yeah,
I think that's right. It will be interesting to see what stays with us, and of course there were things that needed to modernize.
Mm-hmm.
I know in my job there are certain things that will remain. One thing, and I'm trying to do it right now as I speak, is everyone tends to shout on Zoom. We're not on Zoom right now. We're on StreamYard. Yeah. And so that's one thing. I actually lost my voice at one point because I was doing so many interviews, and I was talking as if I needed, somebody in Nebraska to hear me without any amplification.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's one of the adjustments. Hopefully, we'll make it.
Yeah. Well, how do you even track that? Did you put like a sound? I mean, are you tracking your sound at home? How are you making sure that you're not screaming?
Well, I could tell when I lost my voice for a stretch that I probably was talking too loudly, and that I didn't need to be doing that. But it is interesting. I mean, doing podcasting and radio. It's not just a cliche when they say that that these are intimate mediums. And I do wonder, like, if we continue, I really mean this, meeting and congregating part of the time online, how we can replicate the experience that we actually get when we, meet in a warm and cozy hotel conference room. But you know what I mean? How can we do that? And the first thing is probably not shouting online, but it's that's going to be one of the challenges, I think.
Well, so our topic for today was talking about humor during times of adversity. And, you have done an interesting dance throughout your entire career, whether looking at what you were talking about, like The Daily Show, or, the pieces that you do. Oftentimes for CBS, you end up doing these pieces that sometimes are this balance of talking about something pretty serious, but also being able to either poke fun at it or have fun with it, or, remind people that there's humor in even difficult situations. How has your role with humor been affected during, I'll just say this year, because it's not just the pandemic, it's like economic turmoil and political unrest and, social contracts blowing up and all kinds of stuff. What do you see, or how do you see your role as humorist during a year like 2020?
Well, I'll tell you, I think I learned I actually think when I was way back when I was on the Daily Show, I learned that, and I don't think the Daily Show revolutionized this. I think this was, Jack Paar, old late night show hosts, demonstrated this, but that life isn't divided into hour-long dramas and half-hour sitcoms, right? Mm-hmm. To use a metaphor that people over a certain age will understand. The millennials won't understand that because they're all online streaming. But that funny moments and incredibly poignant and sad or terrifying things in life, live cheek by jowl, I guess. And I really put it, and so I learned that, I think, because Jon Stewart would tell jokes and then have a hard-hitting interview with, a government official. But I really put it to use in my own life when I was doing my cooking show, of all things, because I went around the country learning how to cook from grandmothers and grandfathers in their kitchens. But by design, I created the show. I was there to learn about their lives. The cooking was just something to keep us occupied, because I find that when people are doing activities, they tend to open up more. They're not self-conscious because they're not sitting across from me with cameras trained on them in a formal interview setting. And so in the pilot episode, I was with a grandmother, amazing woman named Ruth Teig, who as a 6-year-old in Poland had hidden a barn for a year from the Nazis. And, her sister had been killed, much of her family had, and she survived it. And this amazing woman, a teacher in Westchester County in New York. And at one moment, she was telling me about what she endured. And then the next morning, we were laughing about kosher laws and how she had to set up her kitchen and what would have happened if there was an eclipse in the middle of the Sabbath, blah, blah, blah. So it kind of occurred to me that, she of all people would have had the right to say, like, we're in a serious place right now. But she wanted to laugh. Right. So I think there's never a time when humor doesn't have a role or is categorically inappropriate. I think I tend to prefer more organic humor that comes out of a conversation rather than set up punchline. I'm not a stand-up comedian. Mm-hmm. So I can see how telling a joke at certain times, of course, is inappropriate. Yeah. But I think allowing moments that might be funny to develop in a natural conversation, that really never is inappropriate.
Right. Right. And I mean, when I was looking at preparing for our discussion today, I thought about the fact that, in hard times, people need that release valve. They need to be able to laugh. But, identifying this on an ongoing, and not just even in hard times, but in your personal hard times, you have, I think it's fascinating that you've looked at like death, right? A very serious thing is sometimes the most serious thing that a person might consider in their life. Until they're dead, but you look at death and you say, there are some people who had some stories that need to be told, there are some things that need to be revisited. I'm going to honor that. But, oh, by the way, this is kind of funny, actually. Let's take a look at this. And I just have to say, in Mobituaries, I loved your piece on Laura Branigan. Oh my gosh.
Thank you very much.
For anyone listening, you'll know the song Gloria. I totally, my entire roller skating career when I was 9 years old was devoted to Laura Branigan. And it just, what I love is that you're able to bring that levity, but also that interest to things that people take very seriously. So talk to me about that.
Well, thank you. And Laura Branigan, that was on the podcast side, and hopefully there'll be a sequel book, in which case I'll bring her into it. I want to be able to tell the stories of people that I truly care about, that I'm curious about, and hopefully that interest, that enthusiasm is contagious, is infectious, and Laura Branigan was somebody that my best friend and I grew up listening to a lot. And then she sort of fell off the map. And I thought, I wanted to understand, I wanted to answer that question, what had happened to her. And then posthumously, she kind of became a big deal again with the St. Louis Blues, the hockey team, where they went from the very last place in the NHL in the 2019 season to winning the Stanley Cup for the first time in their 50-year history. Once they adopted that song, Gloria, that you mentioned as their theme song. So it's certainly kind of a kind of Cinderella story, but I found it very poignant. And I guess I find that things that are oftentimes poignant, there is humor and there's sweetness in them. I talked to her best friend who it's interesting, I don't even know that her high school best friend who came in to interview with me expected to get to a place where we were laughing about the time she and Laura went into the bathroom at her mother's dress shop and ended up ripping the sink out of the wall because they were one of them was sitting on the sink out of the wall. And I think when her friend came in to talk to me, I think she thought it was going to be really solemn. But of course we were remembering Laura's life, and that led to a lot of joy. I mean, I think obituaries are not a good obituary is not about someone's death. It's about someone's life. Yeah. Right. It's a chronicle of someone's life. I'm not really that interested in how people died. I'm interested in kind of how they lived. I should also point out that I went to Obit Con.
I know. Listen, let me tell you, I was so impressed to see this. I had my secret past is when I was in college, I worked the front desk for the Joplin Globe, taking obituaries over the phone.
Wow.
Yes.
What does that mean? Oh my God, that's a really, especially for a young person, that's a really tricky line to walk. What's that?
I was ambitious. I was hungry. It was nothing like, okay. And so to age myself a little bit, they didn't just email things over, right? This was all by phone. So I got to actually hear, people. And let me tell you, the funeral home directors who will call, and there are relationships you can develop with these people and get the real story about every family. It was fascinating stuff.
I bet. So you were listening to the stories as told by funeral directors, but also by relatives?
No, by funeral directors most of the time. Yeah. At that time, we didn't have the paid obituary. So, yes.
Wow, what an experience. But you had a lot of off the record moments, I'm guessing.
Obviously, yes. A lot of off the record moments and really touching stories too, where people would want to share. But when I heard that you had gone to Obit Con, I thought, now that is something that would be absolutely fascinating, because what a group of people, right? I mean, they're hearing about these stories, and I know, hearing also the sort of on the side, a little bit more about the family than what might actually end up in the paper. So how did that go? Talk to me.
Well, it was really, really, first of all, it's a lot more fun than ComicCon, which I find really overbearing. It's interesting because the Obit desk used to be kind of a cemetery, if you will. It used to be where people were put out to pasture, newspaper writers. And one of them even said, where you put the losers and the drunks. That's what it used to be.
Or the college kids, right?
Right. And now it's become, I think for a variety of reasons, a real desirable place to be if you're a journalist. And one of the reasons is, as somebody put it, and this was probably always the case, you're essentially writing for sports, for business, for entertainment, for politics, depending on who died. So, and it's also the most purely narrative form of journalism. You're telling someone's life. So the people that were there were in some cases a quirky bunch. The Southern obit writers, you can imagine, are amazing, but they love their jobs. I mean, it's because for the most part they don't know what their next assignment's going to be, and it could be anything. So it's a pretty exciting job, I think.
Well, so how do you even collect these stories and know? In the beginning, I imagine you probably had a short list of well, there's this, there's that, there are these stories that I'd like to investigate. But once you started getting on that path, have you continued to collect them as you're going along? Is there going to be like a part 2?
Well, yes, there's going to be a 3rd season of the podcast, and there's going to be a 2nd book. So I have been collecting stories, names. My boss at CBS Sunday Morning is sort of a master of what we call show mix, like how to give people a variety. I was the kid that loved the variety pack of cereals growing up. I never liked the big box. So I like, you like the Cocoa Puffs, the Fruit Loops. No one likes the Special K. That gets left behind.
Yeah, right.
So I have definitely been collecting stories. And one of the fun things, and you sort of alluded to this early on, is I like to take something that seems like it's going to be kind of silly. Oh, it's going to be a gas. It's going to be pretty two-dimensional, and find unexpected depth in it. And conversely, I like to take something that might make you think, oh my God, this is going to be like watching paint dry, and surprise you by making it interesting. So and giving it a little sizzle. It's all about protein and carbs. So and making sure that they're mixed in the right way.
Right.
So I'm constantly collecting stories and looking at who died, and not just recently, but people from the past and from long ago, and figuring out combinations. I also like finding meaning in pop culture figures that you might just think of as entertaining. And, because pop culture is really important in America. I mean, it really is. And so, that may sound really just trivial to put it that way, but, or obvious, but, we watch a lot, we consume a lot of media, and these figures like Sammy Davis Jr., have had, are also historical figures. Right.
Well, and it's interesting because people are, just take this year, for example, before COVID was taking place in another country, but it wasn't like when Kobe Bryant died, people were just, that was the news. People were consumed with that. They still talk about that. And it's almost like it was the bad omen that and then COVID came into the country. I mean, for a lot of people, they almost like when we used to look at comets in the past before we had television or something, they look at our big, especially when it's unexpected, these big names that mean so much, and their passing seems to have more significance than it would just as I guess a normal plebeian death. Yeah.
The lead writer for the obits at the Washington Post told me that when he first got to the Washington Post, they, for the most part, only did obits for local figures and political figures, because it's Washington. And he suggested, when the actress Bonnie Franklin from One Day at a Time died, that they do an obit. And his supervisor at the time, so no, why would we do that? She's a sitcom actress and she's not from DC. Why would we do that? And he said, that show ran it was 10 or 11 years. And they finally relented, and he did it. I can't remember what year it was. Somebody can look up when she died. It was the most circulated obituary that year in the Washington Post.
Wow.
So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and if have you done the exercise? Actually, I bet you have. Have you done the exercise of writing your own obituary? Where if you were going to do it, usually when you go through sometime if you study journalism or something like that, somewhere along the way, they ask you to write your own obituary. I did this in college, and later I had to do this for a creative writing thing, and it was sad. It was really sad. I was like, I need to get busier and do more. Have you ever done that?
Well, Lord knows I haven't taken any journalism classes. I probably should have. I haven't. I probably in high school did something like that. I've definitely worked on the first line of my obit. But I absolutely do want to fill out my obit a little bit more. It's a little skeletal right now.
I don't think so. I would beg to differ. Yeah, but I mean, I would think about in going through, you start contemplating, well, what's really significant? And I don't know, Mo. So, like, that's a very difficult thing to do, right?
It is a difficult thing to do, and I will tell you that was exactly the reason that I created my aforementioned cooking show, because my father had just died, and I thought, and I think for many people, certainly for me, it's one of those moments where you go, okay, wait a minute. You hit reset, or at least you pause, and you go, what do I want my life to add up to be? What do I want it to be? And I had this yearning to spend time with people who were at a stage in their lives where they knew what mattered to them. They could articulate what had shaped their lives. Everything else had sort of dropped away. And they said, these are the one or two things that matter to me. And so that was really the thrust of why I went around the country cooking in different senior citizens' homes, in their kitchens, was really to hear them talk to me about that, what had shaped their lives. And it ended up, I think, being quite funny. But yeah.
I love that. You know, when I was promoting that we were going to have this discussion, there was a friend of mine from high school who posted it. I mean, that was his favorite thing that you did out of everything.
Oh, nice. Oh, that's
that show. And do you have plans on doing some more of that? And I see Anne down here. She's saying, yes, more.
And call the people at Food Network and make them order up more.
Right. Well, I mean, to that end, you know, when you're looking at some of the things that you have planned coming up, obviously this year has it's changed priorities for people. It's definitely changed what people had intended for that next period of time to look like. And so, do you have new projects that you're planning on because you've had this time of not, I don't know, just this weird time that we're going through?
It's not that I'm withholding anything. You're absolutely right that this is a period to think about, and I've been thinking about my work, which is really important to me, and what I want it to mean, and that I don't want to do things that don't mean much to me. So that's why I decided in this period to write another book, and I'll have to get started on it. But I definitely have things marinating. I find that, like, quiet, even wistful times are good to sort of kind of quiet out the voices that are not helpful, and to just kind of get in touch with what you want to say and what you want to do. I think there are all those other voices telling you what you should be doing, or what other people want you to do, or how other people will approve or disapprove. And those voices are very hard to quiet. And that's the one, I don't want to say upside, because I don't want to, I mean, so many people are suffering. I don't want to be like, this has been a really great period for me to think about projects, but that is one thing that's happened with this, is it's been like, and just slow the pulse down, and then think about what you need, like, and, you know, and also for me, like, don't work constantly to fill a hole. Work hard because it's meaningful, not because it's avoiding something, which I don't think it is, but it's always something to, I think, for those of us who like work. It's important to make sure that it doesn't just become habitual.
Yeah. And I don't even think you realize that it's a habit. You know, so many people in the association space, and there's crossover with the events world. And I saw Dana was on here earlier. You know, they are road warriors. They spend so much time going from conference to conference, holding live events. And all of this stuff it's caused people to really do sort of a reset, whether they wanted to or not, but to sit still. And I think
to sit with yourself, right?
To sit with yourself. I mean, and not on a plane, and not constantly like going from one place to another, but in a way, you know, your shadow's had a chance to catch up with itself for a little bit. And now, you know, we're looking around and we're saying, oh my gosh, you know, this is my life. And do I want it to be this way?
Exactly. Yep. Yep.
I don't know. That's a great segue to this question that I wanted to ask you. And I asked people on the private Facebook group for association chat. This was the question of the week. And it's, if you could go back in time and make little changes to your childhood, what is the one thing you'd learn and master over the years so that you would be an expert at it today?
The thing that I'd learned to master.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm going to say this, but then I'm going to add a caveat afterwards. I wish I had played team sports, at least for a time, because I think it gives you, it seems to me that it gives you some tools for collaborating, mutual support, taking the initiative, and then sometimes letting somebody else take the initiative. Mm-hmm. And maybe I'm idealizing it. But I can't change the person that I was. So that's like, and for, all sorts of complicated reasons, that wasn't something that I wanted to do. But I definitely see what the value is in it. Mm-hmm. I'm glad I definitely did theater because it's its own kind of, obviously there's a lot of collaboration. So yeah, I think, but probably I would have wanted maybe, I guess, to be in more group activities. I don't have a lot about my childhood that I could control that I would change. Mm-hmm. I'm definitely glad that I had a lot of free time, a lot that was weirdly creative. I was not overscheduled, and I'm glad I wasn't, because I think that time was really important. Whether it was lying on my stomach, paging through the World Book Encyclopedia, the 1974 World Book Encyclopedia, which I still have because I was so attached to it. Even watching a lot of junky TV. I'm not sure that I regret that. So I think a lot of that free form time was good for me. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so fascinating because I think no one really expected to have, especially after we just kept going so fast after getting more and more technology to help us stay connected, and pagers, and then cell phones and all of the stuff, and just never turning off. And then we were forced to stay in one place for the first time for many of us for like ever since we were kids,
Yeah. The one thing I would add to that, though, is because people are burning up the internet, right? Aren't they, more than ever before?
True.
I went on a short little vacation, and I love Liz. I remember World Books, the best. So much better than Britannica. So much better than Britannica. I don't really do social media. I have a Twitter account, but I deleted it for a week, and I'll tell you, it really does. I felt like almost of like a physiological change.
Wow.
I think that I can only speak for myself, but I think that social media can be a real distortion field, and and getting off of it, I really felt happier for I only did it for about a week, and I'm only sort of kind of glancingly back on, but it's pretty great. You should try. People should try it if they haven't.
I believe you. And I think it's so insidious because, and here, we're talking about association chat. I mean, a lot of the activity happens in a private, Facebook group, right? And so there's the social media part of it, but it's all this other stuff that you never it's like a potato chip. You never eat just one. Right. You go, you visit the thing, And it's this endless scrolling, and it's designed to be this way, to like get us trapped in it. But how much more creative, how much happier would we be if we weren't constantly, you know, plugging into social media? I don't know.
Definitely both happier and more creative.
Yeah.
I'm convinced of it.
So, and Nick Parker says, yes, World Books, so much greater than Britannica.
Yeah, I think that Britannica, I don't mean to be xenophobic, but Britannica like was so Britishy. I mean, like, I think even though it's called World Book, it was like, it was like the red, white, and blue. It's World Book. It's American. I'm all about the World Book.
Yeah.
Okay. Dana, right, is saying team sports especially beneficial for girls and young women. I think exactly for those reasons. I think a really interesting point. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know, I mean, it is fascinating about the role that I think we're all kind of re-examining the role that things like social media and technology. And I had this index card, Mo, behind my front door that was a family goal for the year. That was that we would sit down as a family. I have a daughter who's 12 and my husband. We would sit down as a family once a week to aim for once a week for dinner together. Once a week. That's so tragic. And that was a goal. That was a goal because I was always on the road. My daughter was always going to dance and acting classes and all this stuff. And it's like, you know, we have dinner like every night, you know?
I'm sorry. So the goal was once a week before the pandemic, and now it's every night.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't give you that was the goal at the beginning of the year. And then since all of this happened, we've all been in one spot, you know, travel's not happening. And, you know, she's doing stuff, her classes by Zoom. And we have every dinner together. It's so crazy. And I look back at that and I think, wow, I don't really want to go back to a place where I couldn't have dinner with my family more than once a week, you know?
Well, there was I can't remember his name, smart guy, professor of marketing at NYU that I interviewed for a piece I did on Sunday Morning on the new normal and what that's going to mean. And he said that there will come a time sooner than we realize where people will be nostalgic for aspects of pandemic life, which is kind of kooky, right?
It's weird. Yeah.
Listen, my mother lives right upstairs from me, and I love not being on the road and actually being able to visit with her and watch the third season of The Crown with her. I'm thinking of starting that Indian matchmaking show on Netflix. Is it good? It looks like it's good.
I don't know. I haven't seen it. That does sound good, though.
I think that I feel like she'll like it. So if any of the people watching now can weigh in on Indian matchmaking, that Netflix show, I think it's a big hit. So
right, yeah, absolutely. Reed's saying social media is part of the productivity for many, and yes,
right, Judy. Well, Reed, I know that social media is part of productivity. I should have qualified it by saying social media just sort of like an addict, just to see what other people are saying. Like I don't think you learn that much about presidential politics from social media. But I realize if it's part of your job, I'm not stomping on that. Okay, Hester says that we will love Indian matchmaking. Thank you so much. And somebody had something to say beforehand. Oh, about Title IX, which is totally true.
Title IX, yes. Yeah. Judy said that. And also Liz earlier, my dad had a full set of both. We're going back, you guys. We are appreciating. I think maybe that's what we need to do. Once there's no more sheltering in place, I just need to go back, and it'll be sort of a throwback kind of thing, and start selling sets of encyclopedias again, because clearly we need this.
You should get into selling encyclopedias. I can't remember. I was like 5 years old. The woman who came to our door, she didn't actually come carrying like a giant set. But Liz, it's so interesting that your father had a set of both. I wonder if he was testing you in some way.
I know, and I do wonder. What a fascinating. It's
like a paternity test. Are you really my child? Love the imagery of my shadow. I agree with that, KiKi. The image of shadow catching up with yourself is so great. I want to steal it from you. So why don't you tell me who you stole it from first? Because
I don't know. Like the Native Americans, I have no idea.
It's great. It's great.
I don't know. Yeah, it is such an interesting thing that this time, I'm already nostalgic for it, and it's not even gone. I just think it's so unusual to be living through it that it's like observing it, but also living through it it's strange. It's a very strange thing. But I do think that it's causing a lot of people to just rethink the direction that they're on. And I have to imagine that that's also part of why, and this is taking it down a more serious path, but I also have to imagine that that might be why a lot of these discussions that have been going on for a long, long time, like the discussions about Black Lives Matter and things like that. I wonder if that's not helping to bring more of a greater focus to it, because people are sitting with themselves. They're taking time to think about, that's not right. Like I have I can't, we have time to actually sit and get upset about things instead of being too busy to actually pay attention to things that we think we don't have control over.
That's interesting. I'm sure. I wonder if there's a way to measure. It would be hard to, but yeah, I think it seems to me with fewer commutes, although people we're listening to say public radio more with their commutes, but if people have more time to think about big issues, because isn't it true that like ordinarily in a presidential election, people pay attention essentially the last few minutes.
Yeah.
Oh my God, Mike's uncle was a salesman for World Book in rural Iowa.
I know.
I want to know, did he sell a lot? I mean, I wonder what went into being a really good World Book Encyclopedia salesperson.
That they had to have like the best conversations. And also PS, did the salespeople, did they get like a heads up, like really feature this part of the book or like this story, or feel out the family that you're talking to and see what subjects they might be the most interested in? I mean, I wonder
totally like profile them, like yeah. definitely in Iowa, bring like the C volume for corn. Like you want to that's how you're going to loop them in.
Or don't, because they'll know what's missing, right? Like in Iowa, they'd be like, oh no, they're not propagating the right way. They're not describing it the right way.
That's a great point. That's right. Yeah. And you see also has Combine. Cal Newport makes a good case for cutting back, eliminating social media media in his book Deep Work. I mean, again, yeah, I use social media occasionally. I've used it to find story topics. I don't know. I think it's a distortion field, and I've actually gone down some wrong tracks by telling myself, everyone's talking about X or everyone thinks Y. And it's like, that's not true. That's not true. You were led to believe that because of this crazy intense bubble that you're in on social media. Just saying. As a news person, it's a little tricky.
But I know, do I dare ask you then the question about, okay, so where do you go to now with the media? So many people are feeling jaded about the media. And that's a very difficult road to go down, because there is a lot of truth to the fact that you're trying to provide entertainment, you're trying to provide something that will be of interest to everyone. But at what point does it become, I don't know, damaging? At what point do we have to take a responsibility for like the stuff that we're sharing and saying, is this guiding discussion or representing things accurately? What do you say?
You mean as journalists?
As a journalist, yeah.
I mean, look, I don't do, I'm not a political reporter, so, I'm as likely to be, I'm doing a piece on statues right now, okay, on the statues controversy. And so I ended up reading history books, which is great for me because I feel like I'm being paid to become educated. So I don't know what I would do if I were covering politics, what I'd supplement my real reporting, my real old-fashioned reporting with. But my media diet is really boring and unimaginative. For the newspapers, I do the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times. I mean, and I wish I could say it was something I like the Atlantic also as a magazine. You know, but perhaps I could be not only more creative in my choices, but a little more circumspect about what I'm reading. I tend to believe that if you're working for if I'm reading a news report in one of the big establishment press organs, I generally trust it. I'm not, you know.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, I think that I think that the journalists whom I've known and connected with, you know, they're all trying to do a really good job. They're trying to communicate effectively, and there's not some sort of hidden cabal where they're like all gathering together.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, the reporters I know are well intentioned. It's hard though because it's impossible not to bring your own experience and your own perspective. Mike's father could talk about anything. He was a history teacher and a huge baseball fan. Awesome. Yes. That's great.
So there you go. And we also have, Eric was saying, this is a new direction, but I'm curious. You have a great show on Saturday mornings on the Ford Museum. Can you share thoughts on engineers and their impact going forward in post-COVID?
Thank you, Eric. So I host a show called the Henry Ford's Innovation Nation. It's out of the spectacular Henry Ford Museum in Dearborn, Michigan. A museum, and this is as somebody who grew up in the Washington area with the Smithsonian, I feel perfectly confident saying that the Henry Ford is every bit as amazing as the Smithsonian museums are, and is world class. And it's a show that's both a history of innovators, but also looks at current day innovators. I'm proud of the show. I think it's important because in a digital universe, it's not always apparent. Because you can't see the inner workings, say, of an iPhone, right? You can't see digital technology in the way that you could see mechanical technology. And so people don't always appreciate the amazing ingenuity of our innovators. It also happens so quickly now that it's hard to keep up with it. But, you know, I definitely, because of my role in the show, think more about the importance of these people, of scientists and engineers, and how they can hopefully get us out of the messes we create before they consume us completely. I mean, you know, it's so that's something I contemplate. I'm trying to remember exactly what his question was, what Eric's question was.
Oh yeah, he was talking about.
Sure. So, I mean, I'm not the first to say it. I mean, hopefully coming out of this, and hopefully we will be out of this pandemic soon, scientists and engineers will be even more valued. It's important for issues of diversity as well. Little girls, children of color, all can be innovators. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, look, this comes up with obituaries as well. I mean, Marguerite Fox, great obituary writer for the New York Times. Somebody said, "Oh, the New York Times." Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah.
It says the New York Times only, features all old, white men in their obituaries. That's the vast majority. And she said, "Look, we can't change history. We can't change who had opportunity. Who did these things. That's what happened." But luckily, that's rapidly changing, and it should. I mean, of course, it should. So I hope that the show is an inspiration to young girls of color, to all young people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and
we need you. We need you to save us.
I have to say that I wanted to grab this and hold this up for everybody to see, because not only do we have our guest here featured prominently on the cover of Mobituaries, but you guys, there's a lot in here. This is a nice, heavy, beautiful, well-crafted tome, my friend.
I didn't want you to feel ripped off.
I don't feel ripped off. I feel like I got my money's worth. It's really great. There's color on the pages, you guys. It's not just black and white. Yeah. So, I mean, when you were putting this together, I know that it was inspired by a lot of the stories that were pulled together and collected on the podcast, but it actually went beyond just that. And some of the, so talk to me about what were the decisions that went into crafting the book, and why is it different than what, just sort of sharing the stuff, the stories that are included in the podcast? Because you have interesting things here, like when people died the same day, and all kinds of stuff. So about 30% of the book is topics that were also on the podcast, though treated differently there. And I want to give credit to my wonderful co-author, Jonathan Greenberg. Yeah. We wanted with the book to tell obviously many more stories. A lot of stories are not suited to audio, and vice versa. So, and they belong on the page. Oh, thank you, Judy. Judy Sanford Guys says it's informative and enjoyable. Thank you. And so the stories that took place from before sound technology are kind of hard to pull off on a podcast because there's no archival to draw from. But on the page, there was an opportunity to be a lot more creative. So there's The Death of Dragons, which is really about the death of the belief in dragons. Carl Linnaeus, who I remembered from AP Bio, was a Swedish botanist in the 18th century who went in the 1730s to an exhibit in Hamburg, this very, very popular hot exhibit of a 7-headed hydra. And he went in there and realized this is a ruse, this is fake. This is a bunch of snake skins sewn together with weasel skulls shoved in. And just like that, in pretty short order, I should say, this millennia long belief in dragons went away because he managed to prove that this was a fake and that no creature has more than one head. So that was the kind of story that certainly never got an obituary, the death of the belief in dragons, but seemed like something that would be fun for the book. I mean, I wanted the book to be informative, and I wanted it to be fun, even more so than informative, but also to be about things that grabbed me. I found in my career that if I'm interested in something and I present it well enough, I can get you interested in it, and it's especially satisfying if it's something you didn't expect to be interested in. That's always, I feel like I've achieved something, if I can make you interested in something you didn't expect to be interested in. So that actually brings me to my next question, which is, again, when you're going through, what makes the cut? Like there are so many different things you could write about and that have passed on, ideas, technologies and people. How do you decide what makes the cut?
I mean, it's got to genuinely grab me. And some of these were topics that I was only curious about, that I didn't really know much about. But that was important to me at this stage in my career, that these are things that I kind of really owned and in many cases felt a personal attachment to. Mm-hmm. But also things that I felt didn't get the send-off they deserved the first time, or any send-off at all. There's this collection of figures called Forgotten Forerunners, sort of the pioneers before the pioneers. A woman named Elizabeth Jennings, an African-American woman who almost 100 years before Rosa Parks, in 1854, was kicked off of a streetcar, a horse-drawn streetcar in New York. And she sued, and she won. And she won in civil court, and it led to the integration of New York's transportation system shortly after the Civil War. And that was an astonishing story to me, even more astonishing that people didn't know it. I found it in a presidential trivia book because her lawyer was a young Chester Alan Arthur, who would go on to be our 21st president. But I thought, how odd that I'm finding out about this story in a presidential trivia book. Yeah. And like I said, protein and carbs. I wanted to combine things that were a little more substantive with stuff that was a little fizzier, like the death of sitcom characters, also known as the Chuck Cunningham syndrome, where Richie Cunningham on Happy Days for the first 2 seasons had an older brother, but the Fonz became so popular that Gary Marshall, the creator of the show, decided to vaporize him, basically.
Yeah, he just disappeared. I didn't even remember that. I didn't remember, and I think I watched all the reruns growing up, but somehow it just I don't know.
He wasn't much of a character, but he was generally eating a sandwich or dribbling a basketball. I love the interesting stories that surprisingly are interesting. Laugh aloud. That being curious factor is what we love watching your pieces. But thank you so much, Amy. That's Amy Hager. That's very nice. I like that. And, and again, stuff can be more serious, like the Black Congressmen of Reconstruction, who are totally amazing figures, or they can be lighter but still have meaning. So.
Okay, so I've got 2 questions for you. This one is about creative projects, jobs. Like, what's the job that you've loved the most and why? And what would you like to do more of?
Well, one of the jobs I love the most that over time has become more important to me was I was a writer on a TV show called Wishbone, which was a PBS TV show about a dog who, in his fantasy life, becomes the heroes of classic novels. It was on PBS in the mid-90s. And that, for me, was a really important job. It's where I learned to write, basically, and tell a story, because we had to take some of the greatest novels, stories ever told, and distill them into half hours for kids through the eyes of a dog. It was like really kind of wacky when you think about it, but it was good, hard work. So I've loved that. I've loved a lot of the different shows that I've done. I love doing Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me, which is
you're so good on that.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. It's a lot of fun. It's a great show to do. And I'd love to do more stage performance. I was on Broadway in the 25th annual Putnam County Spelling Bee, and I'd love to do more of that. I love live performance. And if anything, I'd love to figure out how I can do what I do on TV on stage, or capture the essence of that, because a live audience is really exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. So more of that, please. We're putting that out into the universe, and anyone listening, that's where Mo, that's in his wheelhouse and what he's looking for more of. Yes. Okay, so final question. What would you want? And this sounds macabre, but guys, understand that, like, we're talking about Mobituaries here. So I feel like I'm not out of place in asking this, but
it's totally fine.
What would you want to be written on your gravestone, if you're going to have a gravestone?
Well, for my gravestone, I'd want to keep it really clean and simple. So just no Mo. So I think that's it. And then for the first line of my obit, I would like to read Mo Rocca, who made other people interested in things that they didn't expect to be interested in, died today, period. He was 135. So I'd like that.
Dragon dictation. That's fantastic. I love how you've just put all of that in there. That's wonderful.
It's that first sentence and that clause. That's the key. That's where you pack it all in.
And you have to make sure it's delivered in just the right way. So Sam says, go KiKi, go Mo. Mo, you are a prolific and insightful writer. How do you get in a state of flow where the words are coming so fast your fingers can't keep up?
Well, I wish I got into that state more often. I think honestly a key is shutting everything out. I don't think it's possible otherwise. And it's not easy to get into that state. But when I was writing the book, I was pretty strict with myself that I think I did all my emails and everything by 9:30, and then I didn't look at anything until 6:30.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. And Nick says, no Mo or Obit Con over ComicCon. Not sure which line is my favorite from today. I know, I have to say, it's fantastic. Mo, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. And I think that if, learning about humor during times of adversity, we talked about so much more than that. We talked about, I guess, watching Wishbone episodes might be one thing that we could do to embrace humor during times of adversity. But I just have to say thank you for the good work that you're doing. And I look forward to seeing so much more.
Thank you very much, KiKi. This has been a blast. I've really liked talking to you.
All right. Thank you. So that's it, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the show today. I really, really enjoyed my time with Mo Rocca. And until next time, everyone, keep learning every day. As Joseph Campbell once said, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. Have a great week, everyone.